Hello and welcome to the Vote School Board First District 1 Candidate Question and Answer session with District 1 candidate Grace Higginbotham. Grace, thank you so much for taking some time to be here. We really appreciate you being able to take this time and do a brief interview so that voters are able to hear directly from you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, of course. So I think just to get us started, just a real general question, just sort of why are you running or what made you run for school board and sort of any of your background that you think qualifies you to serve on the Pittsburgh Public Schools Board of Directors.
Well, my name is Grace Higginbotham. I'm a Pittsburgh native. I grew up in Garfield. I went to Pittsburgh Public Schools from K to 6, with the exception of 3rd grade. I actually went to a private school. That's when my parents decided to do something unpopular in the 90s, specifically in Garfield at that time, was to homeschool me from 7th to 12th grade. From that point, because I grew up in poverty, I went to CCAC. I transferred into Chatham College at that time, now Chatham University, where I initially was going to be a biochemistry major with a minor in mathematics. And it wasn't until I read an article on the Black-White achievement gap that changed my life forever, where I just switched majors completely from biochem to education. I ended up graduating from Chatham. I got my certification to teach in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and there began my work in education. I've done everything from community grassroots organizations, working at places in Homewood like Community Empowerment Association, where I did curriculum development, also work with children and families. I also have done a special education advocate for the for the county, where I worked with families free of charge to assist them. And then I also taught for several years in both public and public charter schools, which led me to jump, if you will, and make the pivot out of the classroom, because I figured that I could not do the type of systemic change I felt was needed for teachers, students, and families inside of the classrooms, where I started my own consulting company, which I currently do, which I do cultural competency trainings for businesses and small businesses and school districts, which is why it's led me to school board. I got tired of having conversations with family and friends and reading about things that I'm deeply passionate about, which are students, specifically Black students in education, and how our students are continuously falling great levels behind in things like reading and math and the sciences. And I decided to run for school board. I feel like I can lend my skill set as an educator, working for grassroots, working with the community and students in the community, as well as parents, to forge this, I don't even want to say forge, but to kind of fill this chasm that is continually getting larger inside of Pittsburgh Public Schools, specifically with people that I live around. I live currently in Homewood. I see the students every day. I live around the people every day, and we need help, specifically as students and families. And this is why I'm running for school board.
Oh, thank you. I guess as a follow-up to that, I sort of wanted to know your thoughts on the role that you could play as one of 9 board members in closing that chasm.
Well, I mean, one of the things, I am from the community. I think that plays a big role, even though you have to live in the district, but I actually am inside of the community. I know what it's like to talk to community members, lend my skill set just for curriculum organization. One part of my platform is to have a curriculum in the district that's based on something incredibly important, which is data. We currently do not have that, which I don't understand. So that is something that I'm definitely pushing for. The second thing would be to have a teacher platform. This is something that I want to bring to the school district, where we can have at least 9 teachers, 1 teacher elected from all of the other schools in the district. So all of the teachers in District 1 would elect 1 representative to speak on behalf of District 1, 2, 3, and so on, where they can bring real live feedback of what's happening. There are boots on the ground. They work with the students every day. They have an incredibly important role. And I feel like, why aren't we utilizing their feedback in decision-making processes? And then the third thing, which is also incredibly important, is we have to rebuild the trust that has been broken in the communities. Pittsburgh Public Schools is 55% Black students. So Black students make up the majority of Pittsburgh Public Schools. We have to get inside of the community and breach the trust that has been broken, but also my goal is to engage and mobilize the community members to buy in to the importance of the school district, to be there, to lend their voice in the decision-making process.
Awesome. So I'm actually going to skip down because you touched on something that I wanted to ask you about. You mentioned several times during your candidate questionnaire the idea of a teacher panel and being able to sort of use the expertise of teachers. So I just wanted to ask you a little bit more detail on that and sort of your thought and what you sort of, sort of the beginning part of how to set that up, but then also what, down the road, what you envision that teacher panel being able to do and support.
So I think that you have to also, teachers are also disempowered in a lot of ways. And because I am a teacher and I haven't been that removed from the classroom that long, I firmly believe and remember all of the things that you are asked to do as an educator. And sometimes, a lot of the times, you can't get all that stuff done. There's unrealistic expectations that are placed on teachers, number one. Number two, I feel like teachers work with students and families directly. Most of the time when parents call, they're calling to talk to the teacher. When they email, they're emailing the teacher. So teachers understand they have a good grasp on the heartbeat of what students need. And I think that we need to trust our educators more and pull on them more for their expertise. And this also is a buy-in, because how are we making decisions about curriculum and students and what best practices are if we're not consulting the people who actually implement these things? So that's number one. How to go about that, I think I'm not inflexible, I don't think that I have all of the answers either. I just think that this needs to happen, but I definitely think that there needs to be at least one or two teachers. I don't want to make it a huge thing, but at least one or two teachers that are voted on by teachers in that district that they think or feel and believe and are comfortable with can speak for them. And then these people can come, these individuals can come to the table and we can talk about things like curriculum and what we feel like we want to purchase, don't want to purchase, and get their feedback. What behavior modification practices are working for the district? How, in real time, does this work? Yes or no? What do you think would happen? What do you think should happen? And I don't think it's necessarily rocket science. And I don't think that we should overcomplicate the issue either. But I do believe that something needs to be done. And I hope and pray that in time, if I am elected, that all other 8 board members would see the importance of it and vote it into place.
So that also touches on another sort of general question I wanted to ask. So serving on a school board, you're one of 9 policymakers voting on different contracts and policies and et cetera. So it's not like you can go in there with force of will and implement sort of your vision. So just wanted to sort of hear from you and how you see yourself working with the other board members, because it's a working body of 9 folks.
Right. Well, I think many hands make light work, but I also believe, that I am a team player as long as the decisions that I am making are benefiting the bottom line, which are the students. And benefiting them in positive ways. So I am not against, one band, one sound. That's my motto, so I can't be the rogue instrument. However, if we are talking about making decisions that do not empower the community, that do not empower students, then obviously I'm going to have to be the voice of dissension.
Okay, well, let's switch gears a little bit here, and I want to ask you about the budget. So this is an issue that has been growing here in the district, specifically looking at our deficit and the sort of ballooning costs of special education, salaries and benefits, and charter school costs. And so, as someone who is running to be one of 9 board members, who's one of your biggest responsibilities is the financial well-being of the district. What sort of ideas are you going to bring to the table and sort of vision around the financial future for the district?
Well, I think there needs to be more transparency about where our dollars are actually being spent, number one. One of the things that I think would be beneficial, and it keeps everybody accountable and transparent, is that why don't we have quarterly reports that go out, financial quarterly reports that go out to all of the districts across Pittsburgh Public Schools? Not just from a district-wide perspective, but why can't we break it down district for district, so that the constituents in the district can see exactly where their money is going and how it's being spent? So that's the first thing I think that needs to happen. The second thing is we have to look at where we're spending our money and what we're spending our money on. And then we can start to, like any corporation or business, you have to cut the fat. But you have to strategically do that. And I don't mean haphazardly cut the fat, like, oh, we need to necessarily close down X, Y, or Z schools. Unfortunately, we are now in that situation where that needs to happen. But how can we strategically spend money while simultaneously doing belt tightening? And I think that that's not something easy to do, but I think that it's necessary. And corporations and businesses do it all the time. But at the end of the day, the bottom line always has to be the children. So not to say that, unfortunately, we won't have to close schools, but we have to look at where we're closing schools. And if we're closing schools in the community and that's the only school in the community, then perhaps we don't necessarily need to close that school. We have to look at other options. That's the type of financial planning and also empowering the community to get involved. So I think a lot of decisions are made absent the community, and a lot of people are upset about that. So I think one of the things to help to soothe that area, while we also have to make difficult decisions, because we now have, I think, a 30 million plus deficit in our budget. That's a lot of money. So we went from $100 million surplus to a $30 million deficit. I think people want to know how that happened, number one. But number two, how are we going to get out of that? And number three, how are the students, for as best as possible, not going to be affected, as well as communities and families?
Okay, thank you. So Pittsburgh Public Schools has been dealing with, enrollment loss for quite a while. However, one of the groups that is growing, student population groups that's growing, are English language learners. And with that come a lot of different supports than the district is used to providing. So wanted to ask you how you see your role as a board member to support those students and sort of how we can make a more robust, more welcoming district.
Well, I think that we have to pull on the organizations that are in these communities and in the city at large. Who can we work with and build partnerships with that can come in and assist us? Because I don't think, I think this population is very easily sliced through the cracks, number one, and they can get lost in translation, and you don't want that either. But two, I also think, why can't we invest in getting, we have how many universities and colleges right at our disposal? The central office is right across the street from the Cathedral of Learning. So why can't we sit with the language department at the University of Pittsburgh and make a program where you can have students, we can look at our demographic that we have and where they're located and see about getting students to come in and be advocates and translators for these students, while we simultaneously give all of our publications and schoolwork for these students that are ESL in their native tongue. I don't understand why this cannot happen. I think that we have enough leverage as a district and incentive to incentivize colleges and universities and other people to come in and help us. It looks good for the colleges and universities, but it also is a feather in the district's cap. And simultaneously, the bottom line, once again, are students and families who will be getting the assistance that they need.
Oh, thanks. So speaking of students, unfortunately, the difference with this year's voter education is we haven't been able to go into cafeterias and get 18-year-old students registered to vote, which is where I always hear from students' top priorities of what they want to ask school board members. And invariably, it's always around cafeterias and food service. So I want to ask a question from our friends at the Pittsburgh Food Policy Council. And looking at other school districts across this country have implemented what they call good food purchasing policies. So that's to incentivize purchasing based on the values of nutrition, sustainability, fair labor, local economies, and animal welfare. And, with the district being such a huge provider of food to a substantial number of the students in the city, one, would you be in support of such a policy? And two, sort of more in general, how do you see the district, and from a board member's perspective, being able to promote healthy lifestyle and healthy food choices within the school district?
So a couple of things I want to speak to. One, when I was in Pittsburgh Public Schools, I got free and reduced lunch. So I vividly remember what those lunches were like. The hot and cold packs in elementary school. And then when I went to middle school, the tray lunches. And just most recently, I was speaking with some high school students from Pittsburgh Public Schools. And the first thing the one gentleman brought up was the fact that his school lunch at Westinghouse was nasty. And he went into great detail about why that was. And so we had a very robust conversation about lunches and the inequities even inside of Pittsburgh Public Schools between neighborhood schools and magnet school lunches, but that's a whole nother conversation for another day. But in terms of me being a board member, what I can do, I definitely think we need to bring back, they have health in gyms. Why can't we discuss in health the food pyramid, all of the food groups, and we can even start that even in science class. I feel like there's teachable moments where you can blend these things and that aren't necessarily going to cost us that much money, because I know money is always an issue. So we can use the teachable moments in our science classes. We can get books for elementary school students in English and read about how to grow food. Not only is that literacy, but that's also a science. You're also touching on nutrition. I think that we can get creative and innovative and think outside of the box about how to do that. But in terms of, and that's just policy for being a board member, but I also think that we need to really look into the lunches that we give our students and the nutritional value that they have, and see, once again, with the strategic spending, where we can utilize like the people that you just brought up. How can we make that change, if you will? I know that right in Point Breeze, I look all the time, every spring, summer, fall, they have these open places I can go get greens and different things right in the community. Why can't we partner with our local farmers and people who grow things locally, even if we can't necessarily get them to support the whole district, but can we get them to support the schools that they might be close to in their district to the capacity that they can? So not only are we incentivizing them to grow more food, but we're also getting business to people who are not places like Giant Eagle, Whole Foods, Trader Joe's, and Aldi, even though those are all great places too. But we can utilize our local farmers. And we have a big coalition of Black farmers here and agriculturalists. Why can't we incentivize them to come in and speak to students and also do the outreach on behalf of Pittsburgh Public Schools to come into the community and even show people how to do community gardens that they might not have access to? So not only will they be getting it in Pittsburgh Public Schools through their lunch, but they can also go right down the street to their neighborhood, wherever, area that they designate, and they can get fresh fruits and vegetables there.
Awesome, thank you. Well, that's all the questions I have. We're running up against our time limit. Grace, do you have any other thoughts that you'd like to share with the voters of District 1?
Just the voters of District 1, I would implore you, I encourage you to get involved. My goal as a candidate, but hopefully as a future as a future school board director, would be to come in and really to listen. I want to know what your concerns are. I know that I have a bird's eye view in terms of what the district needs, but I feel like there is no school district without its constituents, and you are the constituents, and we can't have schools without your children. And so how can I best support you and your children during the school year, outside of school? What programs do you feel like are needed? How can we get your children academically to the next level, from your opinion? And how can we make your children emotionally and socially safe while being in our care? And I thank you for having me and entrusting me. And my email, if people want to follow up with that question, which I hope you do, is graceforpps1@gmail.com.
All right. Well, on behalf of the whole Vote School Board First Coalition, we'd just like to thank District 1 candidate Grace Higginbotham for taking some time and talking directly to voters. I encourage everyone to go to the voteschoolboardfirst.org website. You'll be able to find the candidate questionnaires and all of the candidate video Q&A sessions. So thanks again, Grace. Have a great day.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. You have a great day as well.